There we go. And without further ado, Jake Clements is in the room.
It's like Doctor Who. It's like Doctor Who.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Jake, it's a pleasure. Jake Clements is of the Texas Whiskey Festival. And I touched base with him a couple of weeks ago, knowing that I was coming to Texas. And I thought, well, when in Rome, do what the Romans do, you know. And I went and bought a few TX bourbon. And I thought I had about the most Texas whiskey imaginable. We have a Balcones ZZ Top bottling here, which I was talking to my girlfriend and says, Tres hombres.
We've lost him. We'll have to wait for him to click back in again there.
For him to log back in. Now, I'll just talk a little bit quickly about what I've noticed in I haven't been to a huge amount. I've been to a few liquor stores, and I've noticed that there's
back.
Hey, I've noticed that there are a fair decent variety of world whiskies, and certainly a fair decent variety of Scotch. But the amount of bourbons and Texas whiskies that are available here now it's huge. It's impressive just how much there is available. So, what is the Texas whiskey scene, Jake? What is happening in whiskey in Texas?
I mean, it's a booming industry. I mean, it's growing fast. There's new distilleries every day. I mean, bourbon is a big part of it, but I mean, we have some great single malt. In fact, one of them, this one right here, just made Whiskey Advocate's top 20 whiskeys of the year for 2021. I mean, and they're a small producer out of Blanco, Texas. Just one thing is that this industry is growing, but they're about creativity, and they're willing to push boundaries. We don't, because this industry is only 12, 13 years old here in Texas, we don't have a preset notion of what whiskey is supposed to be. So we just kind of make what we want to make. You know, if you were in Kentucky and you make a bourbon, it's going to have to taste like that bourbon, where here we have bourbons that fill the spectrum and single malts. And this one right here out of Iron Root is called the Celt. It is a take on your Irish style of whiskey, the pot still, with some malted and unmalted barley.
Wow, you actually know what pot still is there, Jake?
Oh yeah, you know, I know what pot still is. I teach whiskey education classes too for whiskeys around the world, and Irish whiskey is a growing facet within the United States. I mean, I heard y'all talking about that a little earlier, and it's you know, it went from where it was the most popular to almost non-existent, and it's making a comeback with, you know, full steam, right? And so, yeah, I mean, but as far as Texas goes, I mean, that scene it's just fast and growing, and you get a little bit of everything. We have something for anyone. And to your point, you saw the Balcones on the list earlier. I just mentioned the Striker from Andalusia making the Whiskey Advocate list, but the Iron Root Distillery in Denison, their bourbons won World's Best Bourbon from Whiskey Magazine before. Their Hubis's won World's Best Corn Whiskey twice, I believe. Even though it's as young as the industry is, they're creating whiskeys that can compete with anything the world is making, and it's just incredible to see it happening so quickly.
Now, you say that Texas whiskey or Texas bourbon, or whatever way you want to put it, is new. I mean, it's only 12, 13 years old. How did it start, or who started it, and how has it grown so quickly?
Well, so the first person to get a permit was Garrison Brothers Distillery in Hyde, Texas, for bourbon. Balcones actually beat them to the market with a product called Baby Blue, which is 100% corn whiskey. Very young. I think it was 6 months old whenever they went to market with it. And then kind of really there's some things that, so back to Balcones and their Texas one single malt that was on that list. I think it was 2012 or 2013. I can't remember the exact year, but they entered it into a contest in Scotland, and it beat single malt scotches from Scotland from a flavor. And that really put that distillery on the map. It was almost impossible to find for years here just because they couldn't keep up with demand. Now you can get it pretty much anywhere, and it's great. But that, I mean, things like that. And then just Texans are loyal. I mean, we will support local brands. And so we found a community that's really gotten behind what Texas whiskey is, and the distillers, unlike most, from my experience, most communities, they're all friends. They help each other. They support each other from a standpoint of, oh man, I'm having trouble with, getting, my fermentation is this. They call up somebody and like they give them help on how to, fix whatever issues that are happening. And so I think that kind of camaraderie, that kind of close knit, and then, like I said, the community that is of consumers that are willing to go buy and try and experiment with things are one of the reasons we've seen the growth that we have.
I was quite impressed by the fact that there seems to be the Texas whiskies here are a very reasonable price for what you're getting. And I assume in part that's to do with taxes. Our taxes are they're quite heavy back in the UK and Ireland. So it almost seems as if there is, shall we say, the state itself is helping out on this. Would that be fair enough, or is there?
I think you get good value for what you pay for it. I mean, some are more expensive than others. Like Balcones, they're one of the older ones in Texas, and so they have bourbons that you can get for $30. Whereas but Garrison Brothers, they have a special release that they do every year that's a $300 bottle. Yeah. I mean, so it ranges in the price and the spectrum. But the average is probably in that 40 to 60 range.
Affordable.
And it is. And most of them, because as a community, we're big believers about, we're drinkers, not collectors. And so they want to make a product that the average consumer can easily purchase and drink and not be worried about, breaking the bank whenever they do it.
Well, that's why I like the collectible stuff. I have a whiskey collection. I think most people who drink whiskey tend to end up having a collection of stuff.
I've got Redbreast 21 right here. I mean,
see, but I'm surprised that there is a fairly healthy range of Irish whiskey floating about here. It's come across quite well. I mean, do you see that expanding a bit more, or being a bit more contemporary, or do you see it in competition with Texas whiskies, or is it mutually beneficial?
I think it's mutually beneficial. If you can get somebody, the main thing is to get people to drinking whiskey. If you can start them with drinking whiskey, then it gives them the opportunity to expand their palate and their horizons, right, and see what else is out there. So an Irish whiskey, because it is very approachable from a drinking perspective through the triplet distillation. I love the pot still style, Redbreast, Green Spot. I love that kind of that light greeny, sugar cookie-esque kind of flavor profile that it has with it. And so it's a great way to get people into whiskey that aren't necessarily big whiskey drinkers. Even though that corn and bourbon provides a little bit of sweetness to it, it's still a little bit, it packs more of a punch than, your Redbreast 12 does, or Green Spot. And so I think if you can do that, and then we can get them into other whiskeys, I think it's good for, all parties involved, right? So, and as long as you're drinking whiskey, then you're fun to hang out with. So it doesn't really matter what you're drinking.
Exactly, 100%. Go ahead, Justin.
This has been this is your fifth year of the Texas Whiskey Festival. Then
we're going into our fifth year. Did the first one in 2018, and then coming in 2022 will be the fifth one. We did the third one the week before the world shut down with COVID, essentially, and then we were able to do a socially distanced version of it, scaled down in 2021. And then we'll go back into a kind of a different format, or the normal format, 2 nights thing, into 2022. We'll have about 30 different Texas-based distilleries there, probably representing close to 100 different whiskeys. And I say Texas-based. A lot of them are producing whiskeys grain to glass here in Texas, but some are sourcing, blending, and doing that, and totally fine with that as long as they are transparent about what they do. I mean, ultimately, we want the consumer to be able to decide what they like and don't like. We just don't want you to try to, if you import something from Ireland, slap a Texas label on it and try to call it, that's not going to work.
You don't want Glen Paso whiskey. the smell of heather coming down from the mountains.
Not in El Paso.
No.
I can tell you a story about that. My grandfather took dual pineapples, right, from the Philippines, right, and they sat on the quayside in California for 24 hours, and then they put them back on the ship, and they became American pineapples.
Hey, I mean,
yes. Basically, what you're saying, Justin, is that you're not the only hook in your family. You're not the only grip in your.
Oh boy, very good.
Now, there is a slight problem with having in Texas. You can't deliver alcohol. You can't ship.
We
alcohol.
cannot. We can't ship any spirits. Wine you can, but liquor, spirits you cannot. So, which kind of makes some of the rural distilleries a little harder because some of the releases are special releases that you've got to drive to the distillery to get. Some of them the distribution's small, and so they're only at a few liquor stores. And if you're not in a big city, then they may not be able to have it there. And so it makes it challenging for some. But there are a few liquor stores here in the state that are really good to the craft guys and really try to support them and bring them in. And we try to support them as much as we can too, just because of. If they're going to support the distilleries, then we're going to support them.
Now, say, for example, our guys back in Ireland or the UK are wanting to join the Whiskey Festival in March. Now, the Whiskey Festival, when is it? It's 14th
May
and 15th?
May 13th and 14th.
14th, 14th. Now, if they are wanting to, say, partake of this, how would they possibly get some Texas whiskies, or can they just join in with stuff that they could buy in the UK?
So it's a live event. So if you're going to come to the festival, you're going to buy a ticket. You're going to get to show up. You're going to get to walk around, meet the people that are making it, try different spirits, smoke cigars. After the kind of tasting winds down, I've got dueling pianos lined up to play for everybody. And so it becomes quite the party.
Is it Billy Joel and Elton John, is it? I'm on the way.
How did you guess? I wasn't supposed to tell anybody that just yet.
I think Elton John would be in trouble around here. I watched the ZZ Top documentary on Netflix, and one of the funniest lines I've ever heard in my life. ZZ Top said, one of the beard guys said, yeah, we had long hair back in Texas in the 70s, and that was dangerous. he was definitely serious. He was definitely serious.
That's
he
true.
was. Yeah.
That's true. Listen, if you're watching online tonight, be sure to comment, like, and share. We're on Facebook at Irish Whiskey Review. We're on YouTube at Irish Whiskey Review. We're on LinkedIn at Irish Whiskey Review. We're on Instagram at Irish Whiskey Review. And we're also wherever you get your podcasts from and your smart figures, Irish Whiskey Review as well. We're talking to Jake Clements tonight from the TexasWhiskeyFest.com, TXWhiskeyFest.com. Check them out. They're online. Marty.
Now, the climate in Texas varies quite a lot, right? Because it's enormous. I mean, for anybody living in little Ireland, to try and appreciate the scale of this place is just a no-no. So, I'm here in the desert, which there's a distillery just down the street. They're going to face totally different challenges to a San Antonio-based distillery or whatever.
Oh, absolutely.
But doing it in. I was trying to tell Justin beforehand. Last night here, it was freezing last night.
The temperature varies greatly, doesn't it?
This variation in temperature has a huge effect on the production of whiskey. So, is there ever going to be the difficulties of distilling in Texas, along with is there going to be a Texas style at some point, or how does that
So distilling in Texas, what we're finding is that, so just for reference, I'm 10 hours away from El Paso.
Wow.
And I'm in the middle of the state. Yeah. So the Texas, whiskey age is a little bit quicker in Texas. Part of it is that the fluctuations, but the constant heat and temperature, right? When it gets cold, it pushes all the whiskey out of the barrel and it just kind of goes dormant and doesn't do a whole lot, right? Whereas when it's hot and cold, it's expanding and it's pushing deep into those barrels. So, this, looking at the color on this right here, which I can see, this is 2 years old. Versus, this red, I can pull out this red press, and now if the bottle wasn't colored, you'd see how light the color is, right? For something that's 21 years old. Yeah. And so because of that, we get whiskey that's mature quickly, it's not necessarily old, because you can be mature without being old. As you know,
or you can be old without being
I
mature.
wasn't saying I'm old and not mature.
As his lordship down here.
Yeah. So, so we get a lot of that, and so especially with bourbon, what we're finding is that produces a lot, kind of some oak flavors and things like that into it. So we don't find a lot of real old Texas whiskey. I mean, I think the oldest one to date I've tasted was 8 years. And they're still experimenting. We're trying to find ways to slow down the aging, whether it's bigger barrels and things like this. We're trying to find ways to slow it down. But in different climates, we do see different, angel share and that kind of thing. So it will change by region in Texas. And it's such a big state. And like in the Panhandle, in the top of Texas, we do get snow. And it does get cold throughout a year. So we don't have a whiskey distillery up there, but I'd imagine we might be able to get something a little longer there, right? But who knows? Some places are more humid than others. So will there be I don't know that there's going to be a distinct style. I mean, I think that there's house flavors within each of the distilleries.
Yeah.
I mean, Balcones is a great example. I love their products, but you can always tell when it's a Balcones product. I mean, which is great. I mean, and so, what I can tell you is high proof and bold is really what we're getting with Texas whiskeys right now.
I find I've drunk a few Texas whiskeys now and a few Balcones, and they're not subtle. They're not something that you say, oh, there's a hint of this. It's basically we're Texas. They tend to stand out.
Which is, I mean, and it's unlike the subtleness, like what you get with someone like the Redbreast and things like that, which I love. Our whiskeys are a kick open the door with a band of characters coming behind it saying, "Oh, I want to be up front. Oh, no, smell me. No, smell me. No, taste." Like they're all vying to be number one, and they're fighting for it. And it's just so it's this really bold. That's that boldness that I was talking about, right?
I'm going to open my ZZ Top bottle because I kind of can't not. I was. Hang on, if we can get it open, that is. I'm going to have to go and get a gun.
It's childproof, Marty. It's childproof.
We are. I mean, we don't let children drink that much. So if you can't get into the bottle, it's kind of.
Yeah.
No. I have to make sure to tell Facebook tonight that it's over 21s only in this broadcast. You see, everywhere else it's 18. You see, unless you're George Bush's daughters. But anyway, that's another story.
Well, in Texas, it's probably a little. I mean, legally it's 21, but it's Texas.
It's Texas.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. This is batch ZZT11. What's not I like about this?
Tres Hombres.
Tres Hombres. I've never tried this before. Texas whiskey is made from 3 Texas-grown grains: corn, barley, and rye, in the same spirit of honest explorations and synergy that cemented ZZ Top's place in the music history. Never chill filtered or coloured. It doesn't really need to be. And this is out of Balcones, who are in Waco.
Mm-hmm.
Waco's home of the Magnolia people now.
It is.
They see
Joanna Gaines. Yep.
Joanna Gaines. They seem to be huge over here. There's loads of stuff.
They are. It's if you go to Waco, it's just a massive following. There's always a line of people. Yeah. It's but I always go for Balcones. It'll never go to Waco for Magnolia.
Yeah, not necessarily something that would interest me a huge amount, but Tres Hombres, it's again on the nose. It's sharp. It's punchy.
It is.
It is. It's not letting.
It's been a little bit since I've had it, but if I'm not mistaken, there's some red fruit in there on the nose.
There's a couple of sharp notes, almost a slightly astringent sharp note to it, but there's some fruit, there's honey, but it's very much, this is not letting you go. I mean, that's 50%. It tastes 50%, but it tastes like it should be 50%.
Right, not in a bad way.
It's not in a bad. There's some of these 50% whiskies where you need a little teaspoon just to calm it down. I know this is just open, but it's
I really like. That's one of the newest releases that they have. I really like it.
That's lovely.
Their single malt's great, and they do a variety of them. Versus they do some that are in new charred oak, some that are in used oak. They have one that's finished in the rum that they make, and that one is just hands over.
All I'll say about that is that's a young whiskey, right? You can taste that it's a young whiskey in terms of international, but it's got a nice finish to it. There's some better quality whiskies, if you like, that wouldn't have the finish that this does. Right?
No, I mean, well, and that kind of goes back to that. I think it's 3 years old, if I'm not mistaken. That's where we get that maturity that I was talking about without it being an old thing. So you can still taste that. Yeah, it's kind of got some youth to it, but it's mature in flavor.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that a lot with what Texas is producing and the whiskey that there are. And I mean, we tell everybody all the time, especially when it comes to bourbon. Look, if you're buying Texas bourbon and you expect it to taste like Kentucky, just put the bottle back on the shelf. That's not what we're trying to do. I mean, we're creating something that's uniquely whatever it is that distillery wants to create. And so same thing with single malts, right? I mean, this one that I was telling you earlier, the Celt, is the only one that is actually a pot still whiskey coming out. I mean, we have a lot of pot stills here, but you know what I'm talking about, Irish pot still whiskey coming out of Texas. We have a growing single malt scene too. I mean, I've got 2 different ones here. This is one that I worked on with some friends, new distillery here that we finished and used brandy barrels. And then this one, the one that made the Whiskey Advocate Top 20 list, their barley, instead of using like peat, like a Lagavulin does, they smoke their malt with mesquite, oak, and applewood. So basically, Texas barbecue in a glass.
Wow!
And it's 50%. Stephen Quinn, the ABV is spirits. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. There's a lot of times in which it actually comes out the exact same. But yes, sometimes it does, and I usually equate that to is it's so damn hot, the angels drink the water instead of the whiskey, and so leaving more whiskey. But yeah, so this one, and I'm glad it's getting the recognition that it deserves, because you get that smoke, but then you get a little bit of that like orange peel and leather on the palate, and then it kind of goes away into that more of that smoke. It makes a great old fashioned. It's just all around just some interesting approaches to what they want to do with whiskey.
Wow! Now you mentioned
it's different. It's different, and it should be different. And it's building its own space. That's what I like about that.
You mentioned cocktails there, so you aren't that purist that you don't do cocktails.
Oh no! I mean, I personally don't do them near as often as I used to. Whenever I first got into whiskey, I drank a ton of cocktails. I still like a good old fashioned. I've gotten to where I drink it more neat than anything, but as a way to promote Texas whiskeys and get people into whiskey, for about, I don't know, 8 months, every Friday I released a new cocktail via social media and I never repeated one. So They're all on the festival's website. Sometimes I ended up making them at 8 o'clock the Friday morning I was supposed to release them, and that was always fun because I forget. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm having sometimes multiple cocktails because I screwed up the first one and it wasn't good. It created a really long work day.
I've made this. I cooked this up again. I'll have to have another one. Oh, sorry.
Well, yeah. Sometimes it was that, and then other times it was really just like, oh God, what did I do?
Right. The festival itself is based where? Where is it?
So right outside of Austin, Texas. So pretty much kind of center of the state, hill country, absolutely beautiful. Beautiful sunsets, that kind of thing. I've been to Ireland. I love it too. Beautiful in a different way. How about that? Of
course, absolutely.
But no, I mean we're right outside of Austin. Plenty of places to stay. Lots of good food here. What is my go-to Irish whiskey? Ooh, okay. So my dad, his favorite thing is Irish whiskey, and so I do every time, like Father's Day, whatever. I go to the store with our growing collection of Irish whiskeys, and I'm always trying to find something that he hasn't had. So I've tried a lot of what we can get here in. Right now, my go-to is I really love the green spot that's been finished in the Zinfandel cask.
Yeah.
That one right now is just, it's so light, so fruity, just so approachable that you just can't help but go, damn.
Irish whiskies have this reputation of being very, very approachable. There's a huge and expanding, as you can imagine, it's huge and it's expanding every day. I couldn't believe you could get Dunvilles here, 1808, their blend, for $19, $20. I mean, if you don't know about Dunvilles Distillery, the stuff they do is fantastic. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Really, really sherry laden, but not sickeningly sweet. And to find that on the shelves in El Paso in Texas for that kind of money really blew me away. And it's nice to see more and more Irish stuff making an appearance on an international stage. By the same token, we hopefully will be seeing more and more Texas whiskies appearing over with us.
I think you will. I mean, I know that there's a few that are really focusing on an international market. Yellow Rose out of Houston, who has a great 100% corn bourbon, a few other things. They're focusing on a European distribution, and then there's a couple others that I can't remember. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but that are really working to try to get into overseas markets to expand. Just share it with the world, right? But it gets. I mean, distribution can be really hard, and when you're a small operation. Like Andalusia, they're still hand labeling it all. I mean, they don't have giant bottle. They don't have giant bottle labeling in operations. They're hand filling it, hand labeling it. I mean, it's
okay looking to international, but you have to be able to keep up with demand too.
Exactly,
and that's where some of the small guys always sort of fall down on. They make great product, but there's not enough of it.
Yeah,
and that's always going to be a problem. Now, how many distilleries is there in Texas these days? Man, from 13 years ago when there was.
It's a growing number daily. I want to say, off the top of my head, there are 50 plus whiskey distilleries.
Wow.
Which I don't know. When you look at it compared to Scotland, which is a much smaller geographic area, there's probably more than that versus Texas, this massive state. And that's really kind of where we're at. And there might be a few more than that. That's just a rough number off the top of my head. I mean, obviously, we have vodka distilleries, we have rum, and we have some things like that. But Texas is by far the fastest growing spirit here in Texas.
Yeah, but I mean, it just sort of suits the place. If I'm honest, it does suit the place.
I mean, it's when you think about like a lot of times, especially in America, whether it's Texas or not, you think about whiskey, you think about the Wild West, and speakeasies and. Well, if you're going to talk about the Wild West, well, you got to talk about Texas to some degree.
A cowboy didn't go in. If Justin had been a cowboy and walked in and say, "Oh, can I get a pina colada with a wee umbrella and a cherry on top?" he'd have got shot there and then. I'd have shot him.
Well, Justin, don't ask for a pina colada then.
Get off your horse and drink your milk, Jake.
This Tres Hombres, there's actually a mint note on this, which I found a little bit surprising.
Yep. Yeah, if you can find a bottle of this Striker, this smoked single malt, I highly recommend it while you're here in Texas. Take some back with you. It's unlike anything you've had. I share it with whenever I do these whiskey education classes, and especially if they want to talk about Texas whiskey, I take them through kind of the story of it, from the beginning to the bourbons but we got to talk about single malts. And one of the things I love about this is just so uniquely Texan in that it's turned people that don't like smoked whiskeys because what they're used to is a Lagavulin or a Lefroy, and what they really don't like is peat. They don't like that medicinal Band-Aid, whereas this you get all the smoke without the medicinal and the Band-Aid kind of like those flavor profiles, and people just look at it and go, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Jake, where can people find details of your whiskey education classes then?
They're just I do them mostly for when corporations hire me to do it. I don't necessarily do any just like online, hey, I'm doing this whiskey 101 class or anything like that. But so they all reach out to me via the festival's website, txwhiskeyfest.com.
Wonderful.
I've done virtual events. I've done all kinds of things where we ship out samples and we do the things all virtual. And I mean, hey, I've never shipped international, but I'm not opposed to giving it a whirl.
Absolutely, there should be. Now, TX bourbon is quite interesting too. Firestone and Robertson. Me and Justin have. We got talking to Rob Arnold, who did the book Terroir of Whiskey, who's obviously was connected to this. We have an interview in the can, which we'll probably put out over Christmas at some point. But again, exciting what they're doing. Really, really very similar to what Waterford are doing in Ireland. It's this idea of terroir, keeping everything local. Their yeast is isolated from pecan nuts, etc., etc. I mean, there's an academic nature to the whiskey and that sense of place. Whether you believe in the terroir or whatever, that's entirely up to yourself. But that sense of place, and TX are really gripping that and really taking that forward.
Absolutely, they are, and Rob's great. Every time I've gotten a chance to talk to him, it's just been enlightening and fun. But no, they are. But there's a lot of distillers in Texas that are also focusing on that kind of that place, the terroir. Like, it's so Iron Root and Denison. I kind of showed you theirs. They've won World's Best Whiskey. They focus on corn varietals, whether it's heirloom varietals that don't exist that they're having farmers do, but a lot of them are sourced within 60 miles of the distillery, and so they're really focusing on what that is and how to do it. Another distillery here in Austin, they're using all Texas grown grains. Andalusia, the striker that I did, they actually, while the grains that they use for their core products aren't grown in Texas, they recently released one that was all Texas grown barley. Balcones has products that are all Texas grown grain. There's a lot of distillers in Texas that really do believe in that spirit of place and the people that are making it and where the whiskeys come from. Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing. It's a big part of Texas. And to answer the question on strikers, so if you go to AndalusiaWhiskey.com, there is a place. So there are some farms, some ways where they can ship. They can't ship into Texas. I don't know whether they can ship international, but you can definitely go to AndalusiaWhiskey.com, go to their whiskeys page. It'll see striker, and then it'll say ship to me. Click that, and then enter where you're at, and it'll tell you whether it can ship to you or not. I don't want to make any promises whether it can or can't, but I know that there's a lot of distillers that are working on ways around the shipping aspect of it. We still can't ship into Texas, but we're working on trying to.
Hey, you want to ask Jeff Bezos and Amazon? They'll work away how to ship it.
Right? Yeah. Well, if we could get him on it, then we'd be fine. Everybody'd be set. Hey, whiskey in 2 days.
He could get his phallic-shaped space rocket to take it.
Hey, I'd be okay with that,
I'd be happy enough. Bear with me 1 second. Just bear with me 1 second.
Yeah.
He must be a way to get some here, Jake.
He's got to get his hat.
He's getting his hat on.
It's too sunny here now.
I have to make you big with that hat on. There you go. It's J.R. Ewing. Who shot him? Who shot him?
Doesn't keep your voice down because over here you never know. But when in Rome, do what the Romans do. But no, I can actually understand.
Great.
I actually understand why they wear these here, because whenever the sun's beating down, you do need this wide brim hat, and when it's raining, it actually rains quite heavy. So yeah, I totally get these. But no.
Yeah, we don't have a light rain here. When it rains, and it beats you up.
It does. It just beats you up. Now, a couple of quick things before I go.
Yeah.
All of American whiskey scene now, not just Texas, is just burning out. I mean, there's just distilleries popping up all over the place. I was asked at I actually wasn't. There was a guy being interviewed for the press, and one of the press guys asked him, "Where's the emerging markets in whiskey?" And I said, just to interrupt, I have to say the US, because there's so many new distilleries popping up all across the country. You're buying whiskey more and more and more. It's a hugely growing industry. And in some ways, it is an emerging market, because the idea of buying bourbon and Scotch, the Kentucky bourbons, that was essentially it. Tennessee and Kentucky, that was it. And now it's just exploded all across the nation. Is that something that's going to last, or is there more coming, or What
I mean,
do you feel
I think it is. I don't think we're close to seeing it stop or tap out yet. I think there's just too many. There's too many distilleries popping up, and the thirst for good whiskey and different whiskey and new whiskey is continuing to grow as people are trying, and they've tried the experience stuff. Your old Kentucky bourbons, your Jim Beams, your Maker's Marks. Or they've gotten into the single malts from Lagavulins and all that. Whether it's from America or whether it's from India, whether it's from Japan, people are interested in trying new and different. And as long as that is continuing to happen, then I think you're going to continue to see that boom. And where those are happening are your craft markets like Texas, Colorado, where they don't have an established industry and they're just kind of free to do whatever they want to do because they're like, well, what is Colorado whiskey? I don't know what Colorado whiskey is. Let's make it up, right? Same thing with Texas, right? We're nobody is dictating what Texas whiskey is, and so we are making it what we want it to be. And then ultimately the public will decide based on what they continue to buy or not buy on what Texas whiskey is, right?
Exactly. I honestly think that all of this, there's room for all of it. And the more and more stuff that people are doing, the more exciting it becomes. And once there's new markets opening up all the time, the Far East is beginning to get moving across and thinking, this is something we can have. I'm buying into the collectibles as well, which is a huge part of things now too. So it's been fantastic. Jake, thank you very much for joining us, and we will catch up with you again.
I hope so. If you can make it to Texas, come on. I'll see you at the festival.
The only problem is making it to Texas. You have to make it to Texas, and then you have to get to wherever it is. It's like making it to Europe. It's like making it to Europe, and then you have to go across.
All right. Well, okay. How about this? I know. There's a direct flight from London to Austin. British Airways direct flight London to Austin.
Yep.
And then you're here. That's it.
I'll get Justin to pay that. Justin can buy that.
He's there for 3 months. He's there for 3 months. He's there until the end of February. But there you go.
Well, I was going to say, Justin can pay for it. You can come back. It'll be great.
I get
I'm paying for myself.
Is it okay? Well, you could, yes, and pay for yourself. That works for me too. I mean, I think it's win-win.
It's win-win.
Boy.
We'll catch up again with you, Jake, because it's been a pleasure. We'll keep up to date with what's going on in the Texas whiskey scene. This place is huge, and the people down here are so friendly. It's unreal. It almost reminds me of Belfast. And I'm not joking about that, because you walk down and people say hello to you, and this is a huge city. This is a big place. So yeah, all I'll say is, evening ma'am, all that kind of stuff.
Cheers.
All right. Good night. Remember to comment, like, and share. Follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and wherever you get your podcast from. Just ask for Irish Whiskey Review.